Sometimes life pulls the rug out from under us, only to later show us where we truly need to stand. A pregnancy announcement, a forgotten envelope, and a revelation capable of destroying dreams set off a journey marked by pain, loss, and rebirth. What seemed like the end turns into an unexpected new beginning, where the strength of a mother and the power of true love demonstrate that even the greatest injustices can be overcome. A story of falls, rebuilding, and second chances that captivates from start to finish. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. The announcement of the pregnancy came after years of disappointment. Clara Bennett felt her heart race when the test showed a positive result. Her hands trembled as she held the small plastic object, that simple plus that would change her life forever. At 25, Clara had taken so many tests that she had lost count. Each negative result was a small death, a broken dream that she and Daniel, her husband, tried to overcome together. Or at least that was what she believed. Daniel Bennett was different from her in almost every aspect. Heir to a fortune built over generations, he had grown up accustomed to having everything he wanted the moment he wanted it. At 27, he managed the family business with the same impatience with which he lived his personal life. "I'm pregnant," Clara announced that night, tears streaming freely down her face as she smiled. Daniel hugged her tightly, kissing her forehead. "Finally," he said. And Clara wanted to believe that the tremor in his voice was emotion, not relief. The following months were transformative. Clara watched in wonder as her body changed, nurturing a new life. With each ultrasound, with every heartbeat she heard, she fell more in love with the little being growing inside her. "Do you think he will have your eyes?" she asked Daniel one night, stroking her already prominent belly. Daniel smiled absently, his eyes fixed on the notebook. "Maybe," he replied, not really engaging in the moment. Clara knew her husband was reserved with his feelings. He had grown up in a family where displays of affection were rare, where worth was measured by achievements, not emotions. She believed that the baby's arrival would change that, awakening in him a side that perhaps even he himself wasn't aware of. What Clara didn't know was that, months before they discovered the pregnancy, Daniel had undergone fertility tests. Frustrated by their unsuccessful attempts, he had consulted a specialist without telling her, wanting to spare her another disappointment. The envelope with the results arrived on a day when he was travelling on business. It was stored in a drawer in the Home Office, forgotten among documents and financial reports. Daniel never opened it. When Clara announced the pregnancy, he simply assumed he already knew the result and moved on, never mentioning that he had taken the tests. The day of the birth arrived on a sunny spring morning. Clara was rushed to the hospital, the contractions already intense and close. Daniel followed in another car after stopping by the office to pick up some important documents. That's when he found the forgotten envelope. In the chaos of the moment, he put it in his jacket pocket without much thought, focused on getting to the hospital in time. Hours later, while Clara was going through the exhausting experience of childbirth, Daniel waited in the corridor, pacing back and forth. That's when he remembered the envelope. He opened it absent-mindedly, as if looking to distract himself from a stressful moment. The words jumped off the page like knives. Irreversible infertility due to complete azoospermia. Daniel's world collapsed. He reread the diagnosis several times, incredulous. If he couldn't have children, then whose baby was Clara giving birth to at that very moment? When he was finally called to meet his child, Daniel entered the room with a hardened heart and a mind clouded with anger. Clara was exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son, Daniel," she said with a tired yet happy smile. Daniel looked at the baby, searching for and not finding traces of himself in that small red and wrinkled face. The anger grew within him, fueled by wounded pride and the absolute certainty of betrayal. Without saying a word, he left the room. Clara didn't understand. She thought Daniel had felt unwell. She tried to contact him, but without success. Hours later, he returned. He entered the room and took from the inside pocket of his jacket an envelope different from the one he had found earlier. He threw it onto the hospital bed. "What is this?" Clara asked, confused. "Divorce papers," he replied coldly. "You have 1 week to leave my house with that child." Clara felt the world spin. "What are you talking about, Daniel?" He tossed the test result at her. "I'm sterile, Clara. Completely sterile. This child is not mine. You deserve all my contempt." "I should have listened to my mother. She knew I couldn't trust you," Daniel concluded with a look of disdain. The accusations came like stones: betrayal, lying, disrespect. Daniel did not shout, but each word came out filled with contempt. Nurses and doctors tried to calm him, but he continued, relentless, in front of the woman who had just given birth. "I will never raise another man's child," he finally declared, turning to leave. "Consider yourself lucky that I don't demand a DNA test to expose your lie to the world." Clara felt physical and emotional pain mixed, so intense that she could barely breathe. She could have screamed, pleaded, tried to explain that she had never betrayed him, that the baby could only be his. But something inside her broke and, at the same time, was strengthened. Looking at the little being in her arms, she made a silent vow. She would never allow Daniel, or anyone else, to have power over her or her child again. The first few months were the hardest. Clara left Daniel's mansion with only her clothes and the few belongings she had brought to the marriage. She rented a small apartment in a modest neighborhood and got a job as an administrative assistant at a local company. Matthew, as she decided to name her son, was a calm baby, as if he understood that his mother already had enough challenges. Clara divided her time between work and taking care of her son, sleeping only a few hours a night, always exhausted but determined. Sometimes, when fatigue threatened to overcome her, Clara looked at her sleeping son and found strength where there seemed to be none. On the toughest nights, when loneliness weighed heavily and memories of Daniel returned to haunt her, she recalled the look of disdain he had given her at the hospital and found strength. The divorce was quick and ruthless. Daniel used all his influence and economic power to ensure Clara left with nothing but what she had brought. She did not fight against it. She wanted nothing from him, neither his money, nor his last name, nor his memories. The following years were of slow and steady growth. Clara advanced in the company, earning well-deserved raises and promotions. She moved to a larger apartment and enrolled Matthew in a good public school. There was no luxury, but there was what was necessary, and above all, there was love. Matthew grew up happy and healthy, surrounded by his mother's tireless affection. Clara made sure to be present at every important moment, to get to know his friends and to keep up with his schoolwork. Sometimes she would see her son curiously looking at families with both a father and a mother, but she always explained within his level of understanding that families came in all shapes and sizes. When Matthew was 5, Clara met James Porter at a book fair in the city park. He was a math teacher at the state school, passionate about chess and puzzles. He didn't have Daniel's polished appearance or his commanding presence. James was simple, with old-fashioned glasses and an easy smile that reached his eyes. The relationship grew slowly, built on coffee dates after work, park outings with Matthew, and long conversations about books and dreams. James didn't mind that Clara was a single mother. On the contrary, he admired her strength and dedication. The first time Matthew called James uncle was after he spent an entire afternoon teaching the boy how to assemble a particularly difficult puzzle. James's patience, his gentle way of teaching without ever diminishing the boy's efforts, won the child's heart. Clara watched their interaction with a mixture of gratitude and caution. She was afraid to trust again, to open her heart and her son's to a possible disappointment. But James proved, day after day, that he was there to stay. "I don't care what happened in the past," he told Clara one night, when they finally talked about a future together. "I'm looking for real people to love with all their imperfections and stories." They got married in a simple ceremony in the garden of the house they bought together, a modest but cozy home, with a small backyard where Matthew could play. There was no extravagant party, just close friends and colleagues, homemade food and background music. James legally adopted Matthew when the boy turned 7, at the boy's own request. To him, James was his father in every sense that mattered. The man who took him to school, taught him to ride a bicycle, who was there during nightmare-filled nights and sunny days. Life followed its peaceful course for years. Matthew grew up strong and intelligent, with his mother's sense of justice and his stepfather's patience. He was popular at school, good at sports, responsible with his studies. Clara looked at her teenage son with quiet pride, knowing that despite all the difficulties, she had raised an exceptional human being. It was when Matthew was 17 that the past returned, unexpected as a storm on a clear day. Daniel Bennett appeared at their doorstep one Sunday afternoon. He was older, with many grey hairs, but still maintained the upright posture and penetrating gaze that Clara remembered all too well. "I need to talk to you," he said simply when she opened the door. Clara felt her heart race, but she maintained her composure. James appeared by her side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. She made a slight gesture indicating that everything was fine. "Wait here," she said to Daniel, partially closing the door. She turned into the house and called for her son. Matthew came from the kitchen, where he had been studying. He was tall for his age, with the same blue eyes as Clara, but with a bone structure that Clara now clearly realized was identical to Daniel's. "This man wants to speak with us," she said to her son. "It's Daniel Bennett, your biological father." Matthew looked at the man at the door with a neutral expression, then at James, who remained beside Clara. "Anything he has to say, he can say to all of us," the young man responded calmly. Seated in the simple yet cozy living room, Daniel seemed out of place in his expensive suit. He looked at Matthew with a mix of fascination and regret, like someone contemplating a long-lost treasure. "I came to apologize," he began, his voice less confident than Clara had ever heard, "and to bring information that you have the right to know." Daniel explained that, years earlier, he had discovered that the laboratory that conducted his fertility tests had made serious errors in various diagnoses. An investigation revealed systematic negligence, resulting in several lawsuits. His case was just one among many incorrect diagnoses. "I could have had children all along," he said, his voice choked. "And you were telling the truth." Clara felt a wave of conflicting emotions, validation, renewed anger, a deep sadness for everything that could have been different. "I sued the laboratory," Daniel continued. "The case ended recently. I was compensated with a considerable amount." He took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket, a gesture that made Clara shudder with the memory of the hospital. "This money belongs to you. All of it. It's the least I can do after everything." Matthew, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "Why now? After 17 years? Daniel looked at his son, really looked at him, as if trying to memorize every detail of his face. "Because it took me a long time to accept my mistake. Because pride prevented me from admitting that I destroyed something precious because of my arrogance. And because, even knowing I don't deserve it, I wanted at least once in my life to look into my son's eyes." The silence that followed was dense, laden with decades of absence and unresolved pain. "This money," Clara finally said, "if we accept it, will be put into a fund for Matthew's education, for his future." Daniel nodded. "That's fair. As for the rest," she continued, "I forgive you, Daniel. Not for you, but for me. I've carried this hurt for too long." Matthew looked at the man who shared his DNA, but nothing more. "I forgive you too," he finally said, "but I need you to understand one thing. My father is sitting over there." He pointed to James. "He is the one who taught me what it means to be a man. He has been there for every important moment of my life. The forgiveness I offer does not come with the title of father." Daniel lowered his eyes, accepting his son's words as a fair sentence. "I understand," he said simply, "and I respect your decision." Before leaving, he looked at Clara one last time. "You have built something beautiful here," he said, with genuine admiration in his voice. "Something that all the money in the world could never buy." Years later, when Matthew graduated from university with honours, Clara watched the ceremony with tears in her eyes. Beside her was James, now with completely grey hair but with the same warm smile. In the row behind them, sitting discreetly, was Daniel. He occasionally came for important events in Matthew's life, always at the young man's invitation, always maintaining the respectful distance that had been set for him. He never tried to buy affection with expensive gifts or grand promises. He seemed to have finally learned the most valuable lesson, that true love is built with presence, not possessions. That night, after the ceremony, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her there. She remembered the frightened young woman in the hospital, holding a newborn baby and divorce papers. She thought about all the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the small victories, and the great challenges. She looked at her son, now a grown man, upright and compassionate, to James, her life partner, who had chosen to love both her and Matthew unconditionally, and she realised that despite all the pain, she wouldn't change a thing in her story, because every choice, every tear, every moment of despair and triumph had transformed her into the woman she was today, and more importantly, had shaped the family she had built, not based on blood or surnames but on love, respect, and a constant presence. Clara Bennett closed her eyes and smiled, feeling a deep peace. Life had taught her its most valuable lesson, that true wealth is not found in bank accounts or mansions, but in the bonds we weave with those we choose to love and who choose to love us back day after day, through storms and calms. And that was a fortune that no one could ever take away from her. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.